Morning, morning. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Bread for Soul Convos. And thank you for joining us, firstly. And on this show, on this Friday edition, the 22nd episode, I am honored to be hosting DJ Strategy on the other line. And this is someone yeah, whose career I think started at Rhodes University Radio. He'll tell us when exactly, but he's got 20 years, over 20 years behind the decks, and has played Winter Conference in Miami, the ADE event in Amsterdam, Black Coffee's High Ibiza residence, to name a few. And he has used the DJing experience to create just to really revolutionize television or music television as we knew it. And we're doing shows like Go Chat, Obama, Basement, the Betrams DJ competition that DJ Shimza won, which I sadly missed out into on that competition. Ready D's, Deck Tales, and many other shows. The co-creator of Black Coffee's Africa Rising, massive concert, and just a lover of house music, a partner in House Africa Records, and there's so many things I can't even go through everything. Thank you for joining us, G. How are you?
Good morning. Hi, everyone. Yeah, great. I'm happy to be here. I like what you're doing. I think it's cool.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You have used the power of music over the years to create special ideas, from the TV shows that I mentioned, to big live productions, and just recently, like the Mzansi Viewers Choice Awards. Um, but I want to go, like, if we start at the beginning, where does the passion for music really, where did it begin for you?
Um, I guess, as a kid at boarding school, I had a Walkman, and on that Walkman, I found this world of, at first, I think, like kind of synth pop, and then it got into sort of Kraftwerk, and then I think I laid my hands on a bootleg tape from somewhere, and it just kind of sparked in me this like urge to make it a part of my world. It spoke my language. It appealed to me in the way that it seemed to innovate music, and I think I always loved music, and I was a student of all this kind of musical movements along the way, and there was a big connection for me between the way that events in the 60s, really expressed a certain point of view and brought people together and presented music as a way of gathering people, if you like. And then at a certain point, I think the opportunity around electronic music made a direct connection in my mind, between everything I'd learned about what had happened in the past, and I just saw the possibility of it. And once I got into it, there was just really no going back.
Yeah. And if you could talk about your part at, or your roles that you played at Rhodes Music Radio. I mean, you started. I assume as a presenter, but I don't actually don't know how you started. But you'll explain. But you ended up becoming a head of that station, and just looking at the pictures, that you've posted of your journey with that, it seemed to be such an exciting period of your time. How did you get into Rhodes, and what did that bring into your passion for music?
I've always been a big reader, and writing came naturally to me. So I was drawn to studying journalism at Rhodes. But the era that I was at university was, 92, 93, and heading into 94, which was the most exciting time for the nation. And at that point, there was a choice. If you wanted to express your interest in journalism, you either joined the student newspaper or you joined the student radio station. And the student radio station was more suited to my tastes and styles and attitudes. And I was lucky to be invited to join. And over time, I suppose I put in the work, and I was elected to be the station manager. But it was really just good luck that I was the guy who was in the seat around about 94, because what that meant was the moment we were free, we were issued with radio licenses, which the previous government had really prevented, right?
Mm.
So it was this kind of time where we hit the airwaves for the first time, and we expressed, you know, all of our joy and jubilation, and we tried to make the channel you know, an expression of the moment. But what I quickly discovered was that on the one hand, I was a representative of a very formal, you know, university applying for a government license, but that didn't really go well with being able to run underground parties, which were a little bit off the hook. So I developed a separate personality, and during that time, you know, I would appear on radio and act on behalf of the station in one capacity, and then on weekends, I started running parties, and those parties were quite successful. I don't think for any reason other than the timing was right, and it didn't look like anybody else was going to have a go at it, so I did. And I learned a hell of a lot out of it. You know, it's my very first business. I lost my first money. I made my first money. I made all my mistakes really early, got into lots of trouble, and out of it. And actually, you know, what we did in those days was really the genesis of what Don't Look Down is today. You know, we have a digital business that used to be the photostat flyer brigade, marketing the parties. And the production company is, you know, the descendant of the squad that hauled the PA into strange and interesting places for the sake of organizing underground parties. And, you know, again, like once you've exercised a certain amount of agency following your passion, it's very difficult to go back. And so I think what happened with me was I was in a position where I was one of only a few people that was really interested in DJing. DJing was for nerds, you know, it wasn't like a sexy opportunity to progress your life. It was a whole lot of work that no one else wanted to do. And, you know, oftentimes I'd run the party and I'd be DJing for 6 8 hours. And it never occurred to me that there was another way of doing this, which was firstly technically much better than I was capable of doing, but also where people would get up and perform and hand over. To my mind, it was like if I set up the PA, I had to make sure there was music playing all night. And what that did was it made you structure the music, you know. So you'd start out over here and you'd get to over there, and you knew that you were going to end over there, but you couldn't get ahead of yourself. So if you played the records from the end of the night too early, there was nowhere left to go. So very quickly, I learned an appreciation for pacing the presentation and the music, and how to do that really was in a way more important to me than actually mixing, which I think, you know, firstly, you know, I'd never had anyone teach me how to do it. So my presentation was more about the sequence, definitely, and less about the blend. And then over time, I think, you know, when I really moved back to Johannesburg and had the opportunity to play in clubs, was really where I, you know, was forced effectively to mix more professionally, I suppose, and with the benefit of being influenced by the great DJs. But in those days, you know, being a student around about that jubilant time of 94, 95, it was really exciting because we had huge reach on the airwaves with the students. And then at the same time, there was just this spirit amongst the crowd that was just totally up for it every weekend. And, you know, once you've had that experience, you just really find it quite difficult to go back to normal life.
I guess like you kind of have answered the question that I wanted to ask about your wide range of music and records, you know, because I've seen you obviously play house music records, but I've also seen you playing Kwaito records. I've seen you playing like old school hip hop, like KZR, you know, that kind of uh, range of music. I guess that's where it stems from. But you have created these, you know, you put the DJ on our screens, and I mean, like, you've also hired a lot of DJs in your company, me being one of them. In the past, like, just if I could name a few people, like DJ Pierre, DJ Waxy, NDX, Dexterity, T Tables, Transmix Soul, who I had yesterday, Cat La Cat, Mindlo, and some of the ones that never really made the cut, but they almost were. They had a foot in is FKA Mesh and Essential I. But I want to ask you, what is the your belief? Why do you have such a strong foundation and belief on DJing? Actually, before that, I want to ask you about NDX. He sent me something. Actually, I just received it now, and I think it's befitting to play it before I ask my question. And if you could just.
Yo, LSG, Andy here. Working with Glenn, Master G. It was such an amazing experience, you know. I remember when I started working with him back in 2009, and I think until 2015. I was so amazed at the work that he does behind the scenes, because the guy I knew was a DJ. I didn't know there was so much that he's doing into TV production and producing your awards show. So it showed me a lot about him, like the way he thinks about things and how he takes his decision when you have to make such big decisions, because the guy is amazing. I love the way he thinks. You know, I would work with him any day. You know, working with Glenn, you just don't work. You learn a lot from him as a DJ and a businessman, because I look back at the shows that he was doing back then. He was ahead of time, and for me, that's how I always think about music, about anything that I do. You know, if you wanna break boundaries, you always have to be ahead of the pack. Think ahead. What's next all the time. And Glenn is like that kind of guy. That's what I like about him. And yeah, he's just an amazing guy to work with.
Wow. Thanks, Andy. That's just such a kind compliment. Andy played a really huge role at DLD when he was working with us. And I think we started our relationship when we had a discussion at the Channel O 24-hour New Year's Eve party in Swaziland that Christos used to organize. And one morning we had a discussion. He said, "Okay, cool, I'm keen." I said, "Come." And he did. And he came, and he, really made an impact in a lot of different ways. And if you know Andy, he's not one to compromise. And his attitude and personality is quite typical of the people who work at the production company, where for me it's really, really important that nobody has a job, everybody has a mission. And the value that you bring is not about what you've done, it's about your potential to do things. And in Andy's case, when he moved on, it was just with such clear certainty and conviction in his next move that it wasn't even a sad farewell. It was just part of the journey that we have, and that's what happens a lot at DLD is people connect with us, they contribute to what we do. Hopefully they take away a sense of value in their own ideas, rather than having been forced to do things that they didn't agree with, or that were whack, or whatever it is. So yeah, that's a nice surprise and a blast from the past. What's up, X? I hope you're cool.
Yeah. But I want to get into your belief, your strong belief and foundation of creating TV with DJs. Where did this come from, and why do you have such a strong belief in DJing?
Well, I think that it's one of many ways of approaching the art of producing. But if you think about the dynamic of the DJ, nobody understands the humiliation of losing the dance floor like a DJ does. Nobody understands the need to kind of think through your narrative and present a story to the crowd that creates anticipation, so that they want that next record as it comes in, and it adds something. So from my point of view, and the reason I use the name is, the DJ is so unfashionable now, but I've hung on to it, and there's a reason. I've always viewed it as using the strategy of a DJ to produce other things. It's kind of like our meditation or martial art. It gives us a reference point and a rule book in terms of how to approach things. And if you really examine all of our output from a DLD perspective, there's a combination of technology adventure with a very clear understanding of the need to maintain a really tight attention relationship with audiences. And that's also why there were so many DJs that have passed through the company. Is when you think about a television studio, sometimes depending on the role, having hand speed makes all the difference when you're live, and you would know this from the work you've done in the studios, working at Mnet or producing shows for the different channels. That natural intuition to not make mistakes with your hands is a huge advantage. And some people have got it, some people don't, and the DJs have it in spades. The other thing is, DJs are very rarely late for their sets. And as a consequence, they're really good television crew members because they take, the presentation and the performance very seriously. And then there's also the other element, which is, I think the dialogue between people who, not only the DJs, but the people who are close to the culture and facilitate it in other ways. And there are lots of, those kinds of people in the company as well. But there's a realness to the way you interact with each other because, when you're out playing on the circuit and appearing, there's no room for nonsense. You really got to be as real as you can and get on with what needs to be done and sometimes with what needs to be said. And it makes a huge difference. So I'm always grateful for the DJs that have invested their daylight hours in the company. And I always hope that when they, take it out, and, I think of someone like Clement, who you had on the show yesterday, Transmix Soul, he was one of the individuals who very quickly gained the maximum benefit out of being with us, which was he earned the insight straight away to believe that he could actually strike out on his own as an artist. And I distinctly remember the conversation where he came to talk to me to say, look, it's been great, but I think I can do this, and I'm going to give it my best shot. And at that point, there are no goodbyes. There's just a huge cheer, from everybody. Another person has graduated. And hopefully wherever they go, they take the kind of attitude that we hope to build in the company out and share it on other people. So I think it's positive, and it can create great results.
And just touching a bit about the many people who came through the company and left, and some have stayed. I've been there for the past 10 years. How do you view relationships? Because I like the fact that you're still cool with Andy, and he had to do his own thing. Clement, Transmix Soul, the same. He had to do his own thing. But I assume that's not always the case. How well relationships end, and some might not end in a nice way. But when you look back at those relationships, do you ever be hard on yourself about certain relationships that are not coming, or is it just simply part of the journey, whether they are good and end in a good way or a bad way?
My wife has got a great phrase. She says, you can either wish people well or wish them well on their way. And sometimes the parting is necessary. The opportunity of their relationship isn't being fulfilled. And sometimes people become angry or resentful about not progressing their role. And the reason they can't progress is because they're not building their potential. They're expecting a reward for work they've done. And, what's in the past is in the past. In all honesty, it's great to talk about things, and if it's useful to help other people gain an insight, I'm always happy to do that. But what's done is done. No one's going to thank you or respect you or love you or pay you later. It's only now. And right now, our potential to do anything depends on the level of commitment that we have. So when people get to that point where they feel frustrated or they're entitled to more than they're getting, that pretty much ends the relationship, because it's never been our way to do anything more than and create the opportunity for people to pursue their best. But it's not for me to drag it out of them, not for me to convince them to do it. And as a company, we don't even have an HR department. It's not the way we operate. One person who worked for us for a while also parted on good terms and said, the thing that he enjoyed about the culture was some places they'll stab you in the back, whereas with our crowd, they'll take you into the parking lot and stab you in the chest. And it's a joke. Of course that never happens, but the point is just that it's a self-managing culture. Everybody pursues their best work, and if someone is letting the rest of the team down, there's no need for the company to intervene, because it's actually a matter of pride amongst the team that we all do our best. And if someone can't be relied upon, it's not going to work in the long term. But it's a very free, very non-traditional structure, and it's all about progress. It's never about the past. No one remembers anything you've done, in all honesty. It's only about your ability to do the next thing.
I love that. I want to get into. I mean, I always hear people talking about disruption. It seems to be like the new term in business. Disrupting the status quo. And I mean, for the past 15, 20 years, you've been disrupting. Just simply by putting the DJ on TV, which is something that was uncalled for. Back in those days, back in the days when you started it, and I have another clip from somebody who wanted to talk about your disruption, and if I could just play it. Oh, cancel. Oh my goodness.
I'll just sit here trying not to look embarrassed.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, okay, cool.
And
we are there.
Hi, this is Vinny Da Vinci. Good morning. First of all, let me start by saying big ups to Sir LSG with the Bread for Soul convos. And we're now at episode 22. Wow, man. Nice one. Keep it going. And with our guest this morning, STRAT3GY. I got a comment and a question. Comment. You've changed the face of TV over the past couple of years. You started this game, getting DJs on the screen and playing any kind of music they want. Keep it going. And I can safely say that, you know what? Vinny's house, I think there is no TV show like that in the world. Yes, I said it. And a comment is, or a question is, with the streaming services that are happening all over the world, what do you think is the future of this game? Is there anything that people can learn or what people can do about it? Nice one. Cheers.
Yeah.
Firstly, I'm very flattered, V, that you took the time. Thank you. And by the way, it's Vinny's birthday today. Go and bomb his page and blow him up. He's another year younger. And I agree. Let me just say before I answer V's question, I always decline interviews because I'm usually on the other side of it, and I have some pretty strong views about what's relevant and what's not. And usually these conversations drift into a place where I don't think there's much use in what I have to say. But the reason I'm doing it is because Lesego, this is a perfect example of someone on our team exploring their potential and having the confidence to do it. And the way that you're going about it, the polish, the design, the thinking about the content, these are all things that I think, you've been influenced into doing by being a part of our world and our culture. But they also address progress in the medium. It's a very, very important part of what makes something work. So let me just connect that to Vinny's question. Again, a second-hand or a third-hand phrase that came my way in the course of discussion with my beloved wife was, it's the age of the amateur. And I think that, the digital world that we live in enables a lot of opportunity for people to explore their creativity. But there's a huge gap between, being able to do it and doing something that matters. And for me, doing something that matters either attacks the medium and moves the concept forward in a way that wasn't being done before, which makes it valid. And that's always been our task with DLD's, kind of productions. So when I look at, all of the streaming opportunities and the things that people are exploring, I think that, under the circumstances, it's been a really great way of, in particular for the DJs, who I think have been neglected as taxpayers and contributors to the economy to be connected to their audiences and sustain those relationships. I think it's very, very valuable. But having said that, I'm like really not a huge fan of these like quite vanilla, straightforward, here I am standing in front of my turntables, busting out my set for gold. From the point of view that, I think that the very best DJs have always had the power to understand who's listening to them and who's in front of them and adjust what they're doing. And a lot of the time when I look at the streams, the performer is completely oblivious to the audience. They're in a vacuum. And that for me is the opposite of at least, my philosophy of presenting music. It's always been in service of whoever's there. And if I can't see them, I can't serve them. And if I can't connect with them, maybe I'm getting awareness out, if it's for a new release and productions, or maybe someone's a phenomenal mixer and it's entertaining to watch them work technically, or they can sequence an excellent set. But I think its use is really about encouraging people's self-expression, but 80% of what's happening out there is like, a public telephone call, of little entertainment value besides what it does for the spirit of the person presenting it, which I respect and I do appreciate. But the ones that grab me are where I see, perhaps some of the more successful international artists who have got the producing power, is where the video presentation that they do contains an element of craft, which is much more than a CCTV camera with a decent audio feed, So I think there are things to come where people look at what's happening and someone sees a new trick in it, and that'll move the concept forward. But my view is that every time we use a big system designed for multi-directional communication to direct it, to communicate in one way only, we're missing the opportunity. And I think maybe it's something that's really on my mind at the moment. The DJ TV era is exciting from the point of view of the television executives across multiple channels. And let me just say, like on Friday night last week, Channel O, MTV, BET, SABC One, How TV, Twana TV, KZN, you name it, everybody was whacking out a DJ mix. But the thing that sets the old hit refresh format apart is that the DJ playing live can see the audience at least, through their feedback and their response, and and it provides a level of that real dynamic of house music. Whereas, I appreciate the presentation of artists and definitely the repertoire is unbelievable and everyone's skills are amazing. But it doesn't change the face of television, and it doesn't change the face of house music. It doesn't change the face of internet interactivity. So I'm a little bit wary of celebrating that fact. But certainly I do feel like, we've been doing, this kind of interactive DJ TV format now for about 16 years, I guess. And I definitely am starting to feel a little bit of an itch to respond to the demand of multi-directional systems, and I'm really thinking hard about how to convert the value of the platform in favor of the audience's ambitions, because it's not the only place for DJs to appear on TV anymore. So I kind of, I think very hard about progress and how that works. So Via, to long answer to your question, my feeling on this is just nothing's going to replace the interaction between a DJ and the audience, and that dynamic has to find its way in for the whole thing to work. And everything between here and there is a kind of PR and awareness exercise. So I'm really looking for those people who are taking that concept of closing the loop, because that's where the progress is going to come from.
there's something that I wanted to read that you put up on social media. You said that this is last week after your set on Hit Refresh. You said, "Big love and thanks to everyone who watched Hit Refresh together tonight. DLD's live debut of a wild DJ-styled on-air media tech performance hinted at the power of network TV audiences. 2004's imagined future is here as the present DJ TV trend, and so it is time to move on." I just want to ask you about that last bit.
Yeah, so when I really got into electronic music in the early 90s, was around about the same time that the internet was starting to emerge. And at the university, there was a computer science lab that gave us our first live connection. And for some reason, maybe I was ignorant or idealistic, I could never feel a separation between electronic music and electronic media. And to me, the two were intertwined. And I always felt like the DJing component and the electronic music was really just material in a much bigger picture, which demanded that you did more around it, or at least you applied the opportunity around the material and the content. So when we started doing these, DJ TV things, actually, it wasn't so much about the DJing. It was about the fact that the mode of the DJ and dance music and electronic music was very well suited to giving a soundtrack to the interactive environment that we were trying to create. And when we started doing it, there was no Facebook, there was no Twitter. In fact, if you wanted to participate in the early shows, you had to press OK on the decoder and start a big interactive TV application. And you had to register your profile on the website and all of those things. So, the presentation for me is the DJ component and the music is really critical. And I'm so grateful to everybody who's contributed and really been a part of it and continues to be. But the measure of success for an episode for me was never how good was the set. The measure was how close was the relationship between the incoming interaction and what was happening in the music. In other words, was the audience commenting on the song, and were we getting that message out close enough to the song? And then even sometimes did what the audience said affect the music? So house music is really well suited to that because of its kind of freestyle nature. But, the reason for doing it was never about trying to find a big platform to DJ on. It was more just because there was a natural fit between this kind of DJ mode and the sort of interactive world that we were starting to build. And, the space that we're in now with Facebook and Twitter originally, were the very first time that the internet activity required your real name, never mind Twitter handles, right? But it was a big transition in the world. Up until then, everyone had a dodgy nickname and no one knew who anyone was, and it was quite strange. Whereas now, not only do we know who everybody is online, but everybody has the power of a radio station, a broadcaster, a publisher. You know what I mean? There's so much power in the hands of every individual that this change that I was kind of thinking about when I finished the show, it wasn't out of frustration. It was really a sense of progress, that needs to happen next. We've evolved the show many times, but what we haven't done is attack the structure of the whole system. So it's still very much a one out, multiple in. And when I look at some of the very interesting virtual festivals that have been run, that speaks more to multiple broadcast destinations being joined in something more like a wheel with spokes in a center. Whereas, I feel like the structure of broadcasting out on television and then getting multiple inputs, we've really explored that. And I hope that, everybody who's presenting this DJ dynamic out there on TV can just understand how much richer the experience will be for their audience and performers if they can close that loop. And closing it in that mode is essential. But we've been doing it for a really long time. So, ambition bites the heels of success. And when you feel like you intuitively need to progress, that's really the time to start thinking hard about it. And I must just say, if that means at a certain point, Hit Refresh transforms from a television show into a more complex system, which gives more power to the audience in terms of what we do and what we present, that's where I would be very happy. Because for me, it's never been about my personal DJ residency or my attitude about music or any of those things. I mean, I do have some views in terms of what we try to promote there, but it's always been about the adventure and and trying to recreate that pure dynamic from the dance floor, and it's a hard thing to do because it's such a quest, and like when you're out there playing, you have good nights and bad nights, and when it goes off, there's no stopping it. And I think we've had those moments interactively over the years where we've done things like taking Hit Refresh out to Walter Sisulu Square, with Valentine's in the early days of their music campaigns, and broadcasting a television event where the audience at the event were being captured and transformed back into the television show, which was being shown on the screen, and people were standing waving at themselves on TV while dancing. That's a trip. That's the original ethos of the media hack that we got going with. And I think that's my ambition really, is to live up to that kind of thinking. And it's quite hard to do, because you have to maybe also sacrifice some things. For me to really explore the dynamic I'm talking about probably means giving up a really big perch, with a lot of reach on a Friday night. If you think about it this way, for a television show that picks up, even on a, let's just say it picked up 20,000 people or 50,000 people, who DJs to a stadium on a Friday night? You know what I mean? You have to be very respectful of that kind of support. So, I have a lot of work to do to really resolve that, because you can't take it away from people without replacing it with something better. And I'm not sure that I've achieved that yet in my thinking.
Yeah. And I want to get into the Vinny's House. Like, I remember when you shot the first season of Vinny's House, and one of the DJs, there was some scheduling mistake. I was probably at fault, but somebody couldn't pitch up on time, and I just took it upon myself and said, okay, let me just record so we don't waste production money. And I was not on Vinny's list. And if people don't know this, so with Vinny's House, guys, the guests are selected by Vinny and only Vinny. So if you are not on the guest, there's even me. I was not on that guest list for the first season. I think I played on the third season. I recorded, and Vinny was like, no, but I want my guest on this. And he's strict about who he wants on the show. And I really respect that about him. But you are strict, similarly. You are strict about who you want on Hit Refresh. And I'm assuming a lot of people would want to know me to ask this question. Like, what is your principle regarding who plays on Hit Refresh?
It's actually very intentional that there is no answer to that question. And I've done it on purpose. I guess there are two kinds of conversations that you can have. There's the one that is going to end badly, always, and then there's the one that is going to have a good result. And the unfortunate truth is, that there isn't space to invite the whole world to have their moment, and there isn't a mechanism to apply for it very intentionally, because it just can't be a democratic process. No one's entitled. So I've always tried to find a common thread in terms of who appears on the show. And there's one fundamentally important thing that I've always stuck to, which is I make the sets 2 hours long. Because I appreciate, our culture out at night. People smash their hour-long set and bounce, and it creates opportunity, it creates variety, and there's a really tough level of presentation. But I was schooled as a DJ in clubs by a very smart and talented resident, which was DJ Pierre, who was part of DLD for a while, quite a long time actually. And in the early days, I know that when I approached the club to say, is there a possibility that I can contribute some music? The thing that he saw in my mix was the way that I selected the records from one to the other. And when I said to him, look, I don't know if I'm ready to, present in context, he said, look, don't worry about the mix. The mix will come. But no amount of technical quality will get you through a shit selection. And that's really been the key about longer 2-hour sets, because turning up with 10 heat-seeking bangers and putting them together like you did at the previous venue is one kind of skill, and I respect it. But there's something else that happens when that playlist of hits comes to an end and the DJ starts to drift spontaneously. And that's the part of the culture that I've always wanted to present, particularly to younger audiences with an interest and an ambition around house music, is that there's at least one marker out in the environment that puts forward this requirement that when your playlist ends, you must now be able to present something interesting and be capable. So a lot of the time, the DJs on the show are more experienced from the point of view of, they're not as stressed about, whether or not their mix is perfect. They're more concerned about whether the story they're telling is one of their best. So that's been a big element of it. But I will say also, that over time, the profile of the DJs has changed. I've always been very, very grateful for the guidance I've received from the DJs that I consider to be, a generation ahead. Obviously, my partners at the label, Tim and Vinny, play a huge role. But people like Christos, who are really grandfathers to the scene and the way that people think and behave. So I've watched how carefully they respond. So as you point out, Vinny cannot be convinced to do anything he doesn't want to do, and that's what makes him a very special presence. But in other cases, if I take Christos putting me on in the early days, it definitely wasn't for reasons of competitiveness. It was a matter of welcoming maybe my energy or what I could contribute, but not necessarily judging me against someone else who might have done a better job. So there's a whole lot of decision points that you can entertain when you put together who appears. And I really just try to make sure that the lineups who appear on the show either demonstrate, a lot of experience or a real storytelling talent or some great production intelligence in their approach, or maybe something surprising from time to time. So it's hard to say, because I admit that I haven't made it easy, and I'm sorry for that, for everybody that feels hard done by, angry or disappointed or shut up. Please, it's not intended like that. It's got more to do with the fact that my consideration is around that dynamic that I was talking about and putting people into the mix. And with that show in particular, the text jockeys who host the show and moderate the incoming messages add an entire additional layer to the mix. And sometimes, I look at the chemistry that happens between the TJ and the DJ, and sometimes a DJ, quite surprisingly, creates a moment between the two of them that wouldn't have happened with anybody else. And that suddenly makes them, a useful candidate when we're trying to put the whole picture together. And I think, also, to the extent that the world we live in now has got so much opportunity to access and earn musical awareness, it's hard. It's hard to discover repertoire. So I also really like it when people play off the expected reservation and do a journey, and play obscure old records and reintroduce things that maybe today are being copied, or that kind of thinking. So I don't know, it can sound a little bit pretentious, and I don't think that's what I mean at all. But I will just say that the content and the lineup of the show is really about pushing a point of view. It's not about creating hierarchy or, driving profiles or anything like that.
Cool. I completely understand this. And because I see we've got about 10 minutes left and I don't want to run over. But I want to get into certain questions. Your co-creation of Africa Rising with Black Coffee was like monumental. It was one of the first things ever to see house music being performed with like a 24-piece orchestra at that level of production. It was amazing. But I want to know, will we ever see another collaboration between you and Black Coffee?
I'd like to think so. The timing for that production was part of what made it kick. So, not long before we did the actual Africa Rising show at Moses Mabhida, we had done the big Vodacom relaunch at Orlando Stadium. And in that moment, my strategy as a DJ was to use the power of house music, and Soweto in particular's love of house music, to fill Orlando Stadium with an almost free party, if you like, and use that energy to do the job that Vodacom needed doing, and were willing to fund the whole wild operation for. But what it allowed was for us to go, okay, so we can use the energy and love of house music to create the moment for some other purpose. And effectively what it did was it created confidence, and Vodacom played a huge role in helping us and supporting, it was quite a radical idea. They supported the idea that, it wasn't about using house music to create a world-class experience, which is what we had done for them in Orlando in April. This was now about using our world-class production skills to make something of house music. It was returning the favor. But it all hung off on the power of Black Coffee's original productions. I don't think anybody else could have turned up with that level of creative power and public support, which was a huge component of it, So, I give all the credit to him and his repertoire and his trust. We have a great relationship. And he really trusted the process, because he had to adjust his approach, which is a difficult thing to do when it's all your personal work. And then at the same time, I have a role as an executive producer of these kinds of experiences, which is the last word. And I had to also manage, how to handle my accountability for it, while at the same time completely preserving Black Coffee's creative freedom and control and respect for his work. So it was a phenomenal experience, and really turned out far beyond like our wildest dreams in terms of the final product. And I'm very, very proud of the work that the DLD production team pulled off. Let me just tell you that it's one thing to run a public event. It's another one to run it in a stadium. It's quite another to run it with an orchestra and Black Coffee, and to have every single vocalist pop out at the exact moment in the show. It was really something. And the product that we crafted afterwards, I think will live on for a very long time. To answer your question, will we do something again in the future? I really do hope so. I'm very proud of the work, not only because of the product, but also because of the attitude that it represented and the level of inspiration that I think it's given to a lot of other people to get out there and do it themselves. But at the same time, the reality is you have to fit your idea into the situation you're in. And now, for an artist of like the scale and stature that Black Coffee's achieved globally, the demand for our next show involves a significantly higher bar than where we were. And the complexity of getting there is very, very high, and it's all about the timing. So, for the time being, I would say that, both from a DLD perspective as well as from a let's say, solistic perspective, we're on different paths for the time being, but we are still very close. And our conversation is more about the philosophy around Africa Rising. And let me just say, with everyone that happens to be here, what a big deal is acquisition of a stake in Gallo this last week has been. It is the example of the outcome that we really were hoping to encourage. So the answer to your question is, I hope so, but I'm really not sure when. And the higher he rises and the bigger he becomes, the more of an uphill battle it is going to be to meet the level.
I understand. I really hope that it happens, because just looking at the magnitude of Africa Rising, and where what it became, I can only, like, it blows my mind to think what could come. How big this next thing could be, if and when it happens. Um, Before yeah, my executive producer is telling me we're running out of time, but just quickly, G, it's I want to say to people, it's nice to have a DJ, a boss who's a DJ, because there's always a reason to party. Like, when somebody leaves the company, we can throw a party. When at the year end party, we can put up decks. And this year, when at the beginning of the year, we threw a party to start the year, to kickstart the year. But what has created, if you could quickly answer that, what has created this kind of culture for you at DLD?
It's a very revealing dynamic. So, our company has two very distinct streams of work. We have a digital team, and we have a broadcast and an event production team who share a philosophy, but their day-to-day operations are quite different. What I like about organizing, these sorts of events is, I'm not suggesting people are so inebriated they can't talk, but at a certain point, the event becomes non-verbal, and the very honest relationship starts to show. And sometimes you find that people who are quite reserved in casual conversations suddenly blossom because their ability to express is less inhibited. So I find it's quite bonding for the team in the way all parties are for everybody, but it has a very marked result on work the next day. I see changes, I see a result. And I guess I also do it because any excuse for a party. I've never held a job in my life. Everything that we do has been an extension of those first parties. Every business insight I've gained has come from an understanding of that dynamic. So it's kind of like natural. I don't view it as we're having an office party. I view it more as the collective's just going back to its roots and having a shake. And I love that every now and again someone in the staff steps out of the crowd and busts a set that flips everyone's minds, and then we go back to, pretending to be normal again.
Sure. I love that so much. Just one quick one. I would like you to give advice. Anything that could influence, or people could do. Somebody who's watching out there, who's got kind of the drive to want to take their DJing to the next level in terms of, or anything really, like digitally, because you've done so much, in the past. Could you share anything, like things to look out for digitally that people could maybe spend some time on creating for themselves?
Yeah. So the craft of DJing is a very powerful discipline, and like any similar discipline, there's no substitute for putting in the work. There's no way around that. But my point of view in terms of what comes next has got less to do with a new young DJ trying to knock an established DJ off the top of the pile. It's going to have everything to do with the new style of performer who comes from the world of DJing, but finds some unique novelty in their presentation and brings something totally fresh, that sets them apart. So my encouragement to talented people who have ambitions of presenting themselves as a performer is less about trying to do what other people are doing. It's got much more to do with choosing that thing that you do that you probably are better at than anyone else, but also that inspires you to want to do more and be better. Because if you don't do that, you're going to betray the one motivating factor that you really need to get through the inevitable failures and rejections and despondencies and down periods in the journey. And if you don't have that inspiration driving you, you just aren't going to, make it all the way. And if you look at the really successful, if I could call them personalities, artists, producers, all of them have got a defining feature or knack. And if you can find what that single thing is that drives you and sets you apart, that's the place to focus. And it might not buy you a set at the club, but it might get you a performance somewhere else that's totally, different, but opens the door that you need. But you're never going to get noticed if you're just another hand in the air, waving around, trying to get the same thing everybody else is, on the strength of your personality, the loudness of your voice, or, whatever you do to try and get in, I suppose. Yeah. And it's an ugliness. I'm very sympathetic. It's very hurtful when you're trying to make progress and the world just won't help you or let you in, and it hurts, So you need to have that inner thing that drives you and is your special focus or your superpower, as Toboko and our squad likes to call it. You've got to know what that thing is, and you've got to cherish it and grow that. Because the rest of the stuff, it'll flow.
That's a great advice. I really love that, and I appreciate your time, G. Thank you so much for doing this, and thank you for the work that you've done. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Well, again, I just want to say, I think what you're doing with this series is great. There's a sincerity to it. There's something, very valuable that's coming out of the conversations, and I hope for the audience, they see it not as you using it as a platform to promote your own following, but rather using your relationships and reach to enrich the scene. And I think that really has to be part of everybody's focus if this thing is going to work in the future.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I just want to say to everyone who's watching, thank you for watching. Please share the video. Please tag someone who could learn from the video. And let's keep sharing knowledge, guys. And most importantly, let's keep stay creative. Peace out. I'm on Kai FM. I'm going to be on Kai FM right now, actually. My interview, I think, starts in about 15-20 minutes. But catch me on Kai FM with Uncle Tibos. Peace out, guys. Enjoy your Friday.